Welcome to Campus to Contracts. We're going to dive into what happens to a professional athlete when they no longer find themselves on a team. That is Mason, and I am Brendan. Mason, as an agent for these professional athletes in this very trying time, what are the top 3 things that we're going to get into, starting with number 1?
The first thing, without a doubt, is stress. That hits them immediately. Now, some athletes are in better situations than others. Some athletes will immediately have options to go to other organizations or other teams, whatever their respective sport. But a lot of times there are going to be athletes who don't quite clearly see their options immediately. And they're the ones who are going to experience the most amount of stress. Now, they're all going to experience some level of stress, but the guys and the girls that are not so certain about where they're going to end up or what team they're going to be on next, those ones have a lot of stress.
When you're an athlete and you hear the news, or I don't even know how you hear the news, what is that first contact to you like? Is it you to them? Is it them to you? I know it's a variation, but when you're stressed out and this situation occurs and there's no future, there's no definite future role for that, what does that look like for you?
So quite often when a player finds out that they're no longer on their team, they're going to hear from the team first. And, sometimes I will hear before the player, but most of the time the player is going to hear from the team first. And then I will hear from the team, or the player will inform me, or maybe sometimes I had an idea that they might not make the team and had to, prior to that final say actually coming, I was preparing a backup plan for these players. So the way that players are informed usually just comes from the team, but the way that a response is formed from that player or from myself as a team between us two is completely different based on the circumstances. It changes all the time.
And with that plan that you come up with, is that something that you're regularly working on for all of your clientele? Because you're juggling a lot of balls as it is with all these different options that they may have. Are you always looking at what the next option is, what the next steps could be for each of your players?
Sometimes I have plans, sometimes I don't. Like in situations where players that are on injury reserve and the history of the team to never sign a player back off of injury reserve, or if a player is placed on practice squad, you end up trying to have plans for them to go to other teams or something like that. So it depends on the player's particular situation in which I'll make plans for. Other times I don't have to make a plan because it's almost, I'm not going to always say guaranteed, but very likely they'll make the team. So I don't really bother making backup plans for those players. And if sometimes in the cases where I think that they'll make the team and they end up not making that team, they usually already have plans that come up from other teams wanting to acquire that player. So sometimes I don't have to make a plan regardless.
How long does the stress level usually last for these guys? Is these guys months, weeks, hours?
I would say it's probably until they sign the next contract, in my opinion. There are definitely guys who handle it a lot better than others. There are definitely guys who are a little bit more positive than others. And some guys put their head down and start going to the gym and working out and getting on the field as soon as possible. Other guys, takes a little bit of encouragement for them to get going again and install some confidence back in themselves. So it changes per player.
So this is, for those that can't relate, this is basically a job and they're losing the job.
Yes, 100%.
Wild. So number 2, if you look at from an agency standpoint, is the variety available for them. Because once they leave, now they have this variety that they didn't know they had before, or the variety they have to look at. How does that look like?
Well, so for some players, let's take an NFL player, for example. They'll always have the option to go down in league pedigree, for example. So you got the CFL, you got the new formed UFL, which was a merge between the XFL and USFL. You have IFL, other indoor leagues. You have European football. You have a Japanese league, Japan league. So Players have options to always go down, but most of the time, obviously, they want to stay in the same. They want to move parallel and find themselves on another NFL caliber team instead of going down. But sometimes players need to go down in order to get back up. Sometimes players need to take a different route in order to prove themselves at that level before they get back up to the highest level of whatever sport they're playing, in this case, football.
How hard are those conversations? Telling somebody this is your variety and this is your best option.
It is hard most of the time. You don't ever want to tell a player that they can't play in the NFL right now. You don't ever want to tell any athlete that they're not ready for the highest level of competition in their respective sport. But sometimes you have to explain to them that not everyone's path is the same. Not everyone's path is direct. And sometimes the best path for you is back to go forward or lateral to go up. So some guys get it. Some guys understand, hey, look, if you go to the CFL and you play really well, you'll have a contract still. You'll be playing professional football and you'll always have a chance to go to the league at the end of the year. Other guys don't like that idea. Other guys want to play in the UFL and go straight from UFL to NFL, but those rosters fill up really quickly. So you got to explain to them the numbers, the statistics, the pay, the timing of the league, specifically when it comes to calendar year, because different leagues start at different times and allow for you to play in other leagues depending on when you end that season. So it is a rough conversation, but you just got to explain to them everything that's going on. But at the end of the day, sometimes they don't have options for anywhere else. So it's either play football or not.
And that leads us to the last and final number 3, the breakup.
Yeah, some guys unfortunately are realizing that for whatever reason, whether it's an age situation, skill situation, or what have you, haven't been able to perform adequately, they're going to have to make a decision to step away from the game permanently, to retire. And I fortunately haven't had to tell any player that it was time for them to stop playing. But I have been informed from my clients that, hey, if I don't get a contract from at least this level of football play or something like that, then I'm good with hanging it up. And most of the time, it's guys that have had a pretty good career.
So the lucky part of this in your young professional life is you haven't had any of those difficult conversations with professional athletes. As you journey through this as a professional agent, you're sure going to have a lot of these wonderful conversations that could both be very positive, very negative, and you're dealing with that variety. If you like this and you'd like to hear 3 more, let us know. Thanks so much. I'm your host, Brendan, and that's Mason.